This is a recording of Joy Everett Packard of 15 Little Cub Path, Ormond Beach, Florida, 32074. Joy's area code is 904-673-0064. The recording was made on January 3rd, 1989 by Jim Walkinshaw of the Oldsmobile History Center. This is tape number 1 of 1. Well, I think if you could just start with your name and your address and phone number, if you would, please.
My name is Joy Everett Packard. I live at 15 Little Cub Path in Ormond Beach, Florida. My phone number is 673-0064.
What's your zip, Joy?
My zip is 32074.
Great. Now, take us back to when you started and where you started at Oldsmobile.
I hired in at Oldsmobile in the spring of 1950. I went to Labor Relation, talked with Matt Campbell, and he interviewed me. And previous to my employment with Oldsmobile, I had worked for Ford Motor Company for a year as a finger truck driver, and they needed a finger truck driver over at the Forge Plant 2 at Oldsmobile. And so he suggested that I go over there, which I did. I went over there and they put me on a finger truck that of the type that I had never used before. They had stand-up and a steering wheel on it. The ones that I'd been used to was a sit-down job with a steering wheel.
Oh, my goodness.
And so the safety man decided I needed some training. And so he put me out in the yard with a truck and an empty gun and told me to practice, which I did for 3-4 days. And I finally mastered it enough so I dared, the safety man dared to let me drive on the inside.
Do you remember who that was?
Yeah, if you say his name, I remember it.
I can't remember those guys over there. Okay, anyhow.
And so I, after my training, I went into the hammer shop where they made their hammers, or their hammers hammered out the crankshafts. They'd load up their dies with oil, and put the hot forging in there and slam it down and it would explode. They had one hammer there they called Galloping Gertie. They had it mounted on springs, and the whole huge hammer would bounce up and down as they pounded the crankshafts out.
Uh-huh. This was, let's see, that would have been building 206. Do you remember numbers?
I think it was
Uh-huh.
206.
Okay. How did we, Joy, at that time, how did they heat the billets? Do you remember?
They had huge furnaces, and they'd load the cold billets into one end, and they'd come out the other end red hot.
Like a straight line furnace? A
straight line.
A pusher type furnace? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the man out at the end would reach in there with a pair of tongs and get one of those red hot billets out, and he had a conveyor that had a strap, a chain on it, and he'd use that for leverage to get it over to the hammer.
Okay.
And the hammer man would slip it into the die and position it where he wanted, and then he would release the pedal, and it would come down, and they'd start the crankshaft, forming it. And after they got it formed in one hammer, then they'd put it into another and form it some more.
Okay.
And then it would go into a trimmer where the flash was trimmed off, and then it would go onto a rack, and I would truck it out.
So it took maybe, what, 4 guys or so, or 5 guys to run one of those things?
Well, see, there was one man loading the furnace, another one taking it off. There was 2 hammermen, one to blow the scale away, and the man to operate the furnace. And then they had a man that operated the trimmer that cut the flash away, and then he would take it out of the finish machine and lay it on the rack.
Okay.
So how many was that?
That must have been about 5.
5.
Yeah. And then what was your task?
To truck the billets, the cold billets, to the end of the furnace.
All right.
For them to load in, and to take the flash rack out and dump it in the scrap yard, and to take the finished crank and take that out and put it in storage.
Okay. The billets were racked up somehow.
Yeah, they came from the shears all racked up.
And the cranks were in a rack also when they got done? Just laying this in the rack.
Yeah, just stacked in there like piles of wood.
And they were all red hot still?
No, they were gray. By the time they got on the rack, they were gray.
Okay. But was it kind of warm down in there?
Some of those racks, when I take them out, I needed it. The men working on the lines had great big cyclone fans blowing on them.
All right.
But when I'd pick up the forgings on the fingers of the truck to take them outside, I didn't have a big fan sitting on the back of my truck to keep me cool.
So you got to roast a little. How many of those kinds of lines did they have? Do you remember?
I think they had at least 4 or 5 crank lines.
Okay. Were those all Oldsmobile cranks, or were we making things for other folks?
Most years it was, but one year, or for 2 years in a row that I know of, we were making cranks for International Harvester.
All right.
Their supplier was on strike. They contracted with us to make crankshafts for them.
Did you get around to any of the other buildings while you were at that point in time, while you were trucking?
I worked in every building that Plant 2 had.
All right. How long did you stay then doing the trucking business?
And then must have been on it for 5 or 6 years.
5 or 6 years. Okay.
And then I went in the steel yard on an overhead magnet crane.
Oh, yes.
And unloaded raw steel from the box or the flat cars that bring the steel in. And I loaded scrap flashings into cars to be hauled back to the foundry for remelting.
Did you were you also the guy that loaded the shears?
I loaded the shears, the conveyors on the shears. I loaded them, and I also unloaded the trucks that hauled the steel in, besides the cars that hauled the steel in.
Whoops, go ahead.
And also loaded. We had 2 huge gas furnaces, and if some of the metal came in, and when they took their lab samples, if the chemistry wasn't just right, we had to stack big bundles of steel in these huge gas furnaces, and after we get it full, we'd put a cover on top of it and anneal the billet or the billets before they went in on the shears. We had to take some of the hardness out of them before we could chop them up.
So you actually had the big long bars you were putting in this furnace?
Yeah.
Where was that furnace?
It was right in the steel yard.
Right in the yard. Okay.
On the west end of the yard.
We had 2 cranes, did we?
We had 2 cranes on each side.
On each side, okay. Were both sides used for steel storage, or?
Yes, both sides.
What, go back to what was in some of the other buildings, if you would.
Well, in the building to the south of the steel yard, they had in 51 and 52, they had a lot of small hammers in there. They contracted with the government to make blades for the jet propulsion.
Mm-hmm.
And they hired a lot of new people, and we made those things out of stainless steel.
Wow.
And the last before we ever got into production on it, I heard the time we made the finished product, they'd be obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
That was what Plant 3 was built for,
Mm-hmm.
was for the jet.
Right. So we were forging all those blades over there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that was all done with hammer type forging?
Mm-hmm. Steam, I guess they were steam hammer or drop hammers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We used to make all the, in the hammer shop there, we also made camshafts, and we had drop hammers for making rods.
Okay. Was that in the north building or in the north building?
Go say.
Mm-hmm. Okay. See, now what else? Let's see, to the west side, there was
That was heat treat.
Yeah, okay. How did that work?
Well, they had big hoppers, and a finger truck would dump the forgings into the hopper, and then they had a man or a woman load the racks up with the things, and then when they got them full, they'd push a button and they would feed into the heat treat furnaces
Mm-hmm.
on these racks. And they'd go through an oil bath after they were heat treated and come out the other end. And they would be dumped into a gun and then trucked away.
Okay. Used to have a thing called the pickle room, as I remember.
Yeah, acid.
Yeah, what was that used for?
That was used for cleaning the steel. To take the when in the forging operation, there used to be some pieces of the flash or that would stick to the forging,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd put it in this acid bath, and that would clean it. Come out of there absolutely clean.
Okay. Do you remember how that thing worked? The pickle room?
Not too much. That was one place I didn't do any trucking in.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time on a weekend, there was somebody in there cleaning the windows, and he fell off the window and fell in the pickle tank.
Oh, my Lord. I assume that was the end of him.
That was the end.
Mm-hmm.
It was so strong with acid that you could tell, if you take a deep breath,
Yeah.
you could feel it.
Uh-huh.
There wasn't much trucking going on in there.
Yeah.
I forget how it seems like it, when they took the forgings out of it worked, they had an electric hoist, and they let it down into the acid in a rack,
Mm-hmm.
and then pull it up after it'd been in there for so many hours, and then let it drain, and then they would hang them on a conveyor,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd go someplace. I forget where it was.
Okay. Well, what other kinds of things did we make? Seems like I remember some bumper parts we used to make in there.
Yeah, we used to make the brackets.
Yeah, the big old heavy bumper brackets.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where were those done?
They were done over in the upsetter department.
Okay.
We'd in the steel yard, we used to forge, or not forge them, shear them, the blanks, and send them over there, and then they'd put them in a press and shape them to size, but they weren't ever heat treated.
Okay.
They didn't have to go through heat treat.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an awful lot of service parts we had to run for those type of brackets.
I can imagine. First thing that gets broke.
Didn't break, it just
Yeah, yeah.
all they had to do was send the thing back to us and put it in the press. We could bend it back straight and it would be all right.
Yeah.
They weren't,
Right.
they didn't make too good of bumper brackets that year.
Uh-huh. Now upsetting, we did a bunch of upsetting.
Yeah, we upset the axles.
Okay,
They used to make those over in the hammer shop too.
all right.
They had the rolls over there, and they'd roll you'd take a billet that was about 16 inches long and roll it out to 30 inches long, and put it on a rack, and then it would go out in the steel yard for storage, and then it would go over to the upsetter department, and they'd flange one end of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other end had to be machined.
Okay. The rolling operation, was that a hot operation too?
That was hot. They had slit furnaces, and they used to, a man had to have a pair of tongs, and he'd pick up a billet that was 16 or 20 inches long and put it into the slit furnace.
Mm-hmm.
And that would hold about 50 of those billets for the axle shafts. And he'd load the furnace, and then when it got hot enough, he'd start at one end, and for every one he took out, he'd put a cold one in.
Mm-hmm.
And he's run those down on a slide rail to the water bath. He'd have to put it in the water bath and hit the lever, give it a shot of water to clean the scale off of it.
Oh, okay.
And then he would give it to the roll operator, and the roll operator would run it through 6 or 7 passes, and
Mm-hmm.
it would go on a conveyor, come out on the other end, and there was a man back there that operated the trimmer. He had to trim the nubbin off of one end of it.
Okay. That nubbin was there for what, hang-on purposes or something?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so as you could put your tongs on it. And
Uh-huh.
on top of that, it
Yeah.
was they all come out of there too.
Uh-huh.
The same size.
Okay.
And then they had a trimmer there that would cut that nubbing off,
Mm-hmm.
and it would go on the rack, and it was trucked out into the steel yard,
See, and the upsetters were where?
straight south of the steel yard.
Okay, they were in that building. Okay. Mhm. Which was 202, maybe?
Might have been 202.
Yeah, okay. And then the upsetting of the actual shaft, they would reheat again?
They'd reheat the one end
Yeah.
where it would be upset.
Uh-huh. And that was that another, what kind of a furnace was that?
Trying to recall how they hit those. I think it was electrical induction.
Oh, an induction heater.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'd upset just the one end, or heat just the one end,
Yeah.
put it in the upsetter, and then go on a rack
Mm-hmm.
and back out in the steel yard. And then from there, they'd go to plant 3 for machining.
Okay. Do you remember how many upsetters we had, Joy?
Must have been a dozen or 15.
Mm-hmm. Were there any presses at that time for press forging? Rather than the hammer forging?
But just the press was for the brackets that we
Just
made.
the brackets. We weren't doing any like making rods or those kinds of things with press it.
No,
Okay.
no, the rods were all made on a board hammer.
Mm-hmm. Where were the board hammers?
They were in the hammer shop.
They were up in the hammer shop. Okay. Well, okay. So anyway, you stayed trucker for several years.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Then I broke in on the overhead magnet cranes.
Okay, then you were on the crane, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How long did you stay there?
That would have got me into 1960.
Okay.
Some way or other, I got out in the back office where Alex Pratt was the general foreman of material handling.
Okay. That was all material handling sort of job, even the crane operator.
Yeah. And No, I was trucking. I wound up out there trucking, loading trucks
Okay, at the
with
dock there?
forgings and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I hung around when in my spare time, I hung around the office, and they had a clerk in there that worked at night. Most of my life, I worked at night at Oldsmobile,
Mm-hmm.
and I forget his name. He's dead. He died. He used to load the box. We used to load boxcars with stuff from the dock. And one time he was driving a nail into a blocking that he was putting in there with a ball peen hammer, and that nail flew off and hit him in the temple. My Lord! And it blinded him. And can't remember his name.
Hmm.
Anyway, he went on supervision, and they needed a clerk in the office. And I hung out in there so much in my spare time that I knew what the clerk was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So Alex asked me if I would take over. And I said, yeah, I don't mind. And so I went into clerking. What year do you think that was, Ruth?
That's okay.
See, 60.
Years and years.
You're right.
It was sometime during the 60s.
Okay. And that was in the material handling office back in the
Yeah.
back of
Yeah.
206. Was that 206?
Yeah, that was 206.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happened there?
Well, we changed. We got to making front. Well, we was making the final drive for the Tornado,
Okay.
and
So that must have been 66.
it was.
Yeah, because that's when Tornado came out, was in 66.
Oh yeah.
Machining you're talking about? Actually doing the machining work?
We actually did everything to it, final assembly and everything on it,
Okay.
and
Now, at some point in time in there, the rear axle came over there too, where you were machining gears and doing all that stuff.
we were making front end assemblies
Okay, and you were
for the
making
Cutlass.
for F-85? Yeah,
Yeah.
that would have been 61, 2, and 3 that we made that that separate front end assembly.
I was in the office there at the time.
Okay. And I think when that left, yeah, it must have been 64 or 5, we converted a lot of the area to making axles, rear axles.
Oh, rear ends.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All the gear cutting.
that's right. The old trucks used to come in there and haul them down to Buick.
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, we had a regular assembly line over there.
Mm-hmm.
We used to load box cars out and down there in 201.
Okay.
We'd load them for out of town assembly plants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
BOP. Is that what they call it?
Yeah,
BOP.
back in those days, that's what they called it. Later it became GMAD, but yeah. Who were some of the when you started, Joy? Who was your boss? Do you remember who he was? What is
Bean Belk.
Okay.
He was my. Oh, you mean in the hammer shop?
Yeah.
Oh. He was killed in an automobile accident
Mm.
on US 2 in the Upper Peninsula.
Oh my goodness.
His 16-year-old boy was driving the car, and he was sitting beside of him, and his wife was in the back seat. The two front seat riders were both killed. His wife survived. What was his name?
It's okay. And then keep coming forward. Then who can you think of as bosses that you had?
Well, from when I went to work in the steel yard in the crane, Bean Bell was my foreman.
Okay.
And then when I went out in the back, Alex Pratt was of course the general foreman.
Yeah.
And so I went to work for him and Ray Federall. And
Was Ray out there?
no, he wasn't out there, but he'd come
Okay.
over.
He would come over and see you. Okay, right.
And then along in the 70s, we made that big changeover for the front end assemblies and the rear axles and stuff. And we got some other bosses in there. What was their name? All I can remember is Ray Federall.
Mm-hmm. Why do you remember him?
Yeah. Of course, Bob Cook used to come over there once in a while,
Sure.
too.
Yeah.
If we were loading too many boxcars and not feeding the main plant assembly, and the lane was about ready to go down, Bob Cook would appear.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Have a little choice word or two for you, probably.
He'd ask some few questions, and that's all it needed. When you going to quit loading that car? Give me something.
How about some of the plant operating bosses? Like who were the superintendents? Do you remember any of those?
Some of them I'd like to remember, not remember.
Mm-hmm.
What was their names? They sometime or other they sent a bunch of in there from Buick, transferred them up there to get us started.
Was that on the gear making business when we started that, perhaps?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe that's when Andy Aku came to the
I remember that name, Andy Aku.
He came from somewhere, Chevrolet or
Chevrolet, I
I
think.
think it was, yeah.
There was another one. He didn't last too long there. They shipped him out.
The Claude Basing was there for a period of time, as I remember. He was down in the front suspension area.
Yeah.
As a general foreman or something like that.
Assembly down there. Claude was.
Yeah. I remember a guy by the name of Emil Zern. Does that ring a bell?
The name does, but I don't attach it to him. Emil Zern.
Culp, a guy by the name of
Louis Culp.
Louis Culp.
Yeah, he was in heat treat.
Okay.
Along with Wayne Steinkamp.
Okay. Bud Miller.
Bud Miller. I understand he's dead.
No.
No?
No. In fact, I will be seeing him in about a week and a half or two.
Yeah?
He's over by Venice. Is it Venice? Or Fort Myers, in the Fort Myers area.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Bud Miller?
Yeah.
Golly, I swore I read in the
No.
team that he was dead.
No.
He was upstairs with who was the plant manager there?
Well, I remember Elmer Corbin was there for a period of time, but I think before him there was somebody else who you may have known, maybe. Let's see, was Bugs Dakin? Was he a guy?
I remember Dakin. Was that his name? Bud?
Bugs.
Bugs?
Yeah, I think that was him.
I never heard that terminology of it before. Bugs.
Yeah, good name.
Dakin.
Yeah.
I remember Dakin. He was in there with Bud Miller.
Was he?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
Well, that's probably right, because that's where Elmer Corbin was up there when I remember that.
Yeah.
Up in that front office on the second floor.
Yeah. What was that safety man's name? I remember Powers.
John Powers?
Yeah.
Well, he was in labor relations or something? Any labor situations you can remember? Have any remembrances of any, I'll call it problems, or probably not problems, but.
Well, when I first went to work to Oldsmobile, the union wasn't in there very strong.
They were not.
No. I remember how happy I was when they finally made out equalization of overtime hours
Oh, yeah.
chart.
Mhm.
If you was a favorite of the foreman, you got to work Saturdays, Sundays
Mm-hmm.
with no equalization of hours.
Mm-hmm.
And when they finally made them equalize the hours and put up the charts, why you could get evened out better.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody was more on the same level.
Do you remember what you started at wage-wise?
Do you remember, Ruth?
But you used to work
Yeah. I'll tell you, it wasn't very much compared to what they got now.
Oh, I know. That's why it's for relativity's sake, it's
Yeah.
interesting to compare
The
those.
first job I ever had in my lifetime was first job I had. I went to work. $20 old.
Where were you working for 67 cents an hour?
For the Department of Street Railways in Detroit, Michigan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Driving a bus.
All right.
I when I was 17 years old, going on 18, I enlisted in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
That was back in the Depression days.
Yeah.
And I went to Fort Wayne there in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 3 years between there and Camp Custer.
Oh, yes. Battle Creek area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I got discharged, I went down to the DSR and put my application in,
Mm-hmm.
and they hired me right away. I went on the extra board, and for 5 years I ran trippers from 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41. You know, for 5 years I worked on the extra board.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, as you know, World War II came
Yeah.
along.
Yes. Changed a lot of people.
I was the first one they called.
Mm-hmm. See, back to Joy at the plant. Was there a fence around the plant?
Mhm.
Where was the parking lot?
Out on Saginaw Street.
Okay. You had a mess of ball diamonds too, I think, next to the parking lot.
No,
Softball diamonds.
no,
Don't remember those.
didn't have them.
Hmm.
There's a railroad track out there
To the west of the parking lot.
to the east of the
No,
parking lot.
west of the parking lot.
East of the park, west of the parking
Yeah.
lot.
Mhm.
Well, that was another street out there.
Well, when you got
We
to
took up the
Roseberry.
whole street.
Yeah.
There was no ball diamond there ever.
Don't remember the ball diamonds.
There was never a ball diamond there any time that I was there.
Okay.
We had a great big huge well where we pumped water out of it for
Okay.
our cooling towers and stuff for
They were using those wells. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the plant was fenced.
yeah, all the way.
Okay. And where was the, you had a personnel department, I think, there, sort of.
Yeah,
Where was that?
upstairs in 202.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what else was upstairs in 202?
Toilets.
Okay.
And a ramp that connected it was a ramp that went from 202 over to 206.
All right. Where was the, do you remember the plant engineering offices? Where were they?
They were up there with Corbin.
Okay.
Oh, and they were also there in 202.
They were in 202.
Yeah.
Okay. In the dye room?
Dye room was in the east end of 206.
Okay. Down on the first floor?
Yeah, on the first floor.
Uh-huh. Was there any heat in the plant other than the heat that came out of the furnaces? Do you remember?
They had gas, overhead gas
Heaters?
heaters, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. And they used to have some kind of cooling for the guys that ran the hammers. Other than fans, did they have
Yeah,
like air conditioning sort of that they blew on them?
yeah, huge floor fans
Mm-hmm.
that hurricane force. I imagine the force of the wind coming out of them was probably about 50, 60 miles an hour.
Okay. Did people have any special clothing they had to wear because of all the heat that they
Yeah,
were
the hammermen all wore wool underwear.
wool?
Uh,
Why would they?
that would keep the heat off of them,
Really?
right? As well, keep them cool in the inside.
Uh-huh.
And the flash used to fly up when they'd strike the forging. The flash used to fly up and land right here on their chest.
Boy.
And you could always tell a hammerman by seeing the splotches where he'd been burnt from the flashings.
It would go right through his clothing.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but if he didn't keep his wool underwear up around here.
Around his neck.
Yeah.
Huh. How about special eye protection or hearing?
Everybody was required to wear safety glasses.
All right.
And if you worked in the hammer shop, you had to wear a helmet. And all our finger trucks had racks over the top of where you worked on them. There was racks.
Like an overhead guard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did people have to wear ear protection, hearing protection at all?
The hammermen used to stick cotton batting in their ears.
They used cotton batting for their ear protection.
Yeah. And safety shoes were a must.
Mm-hmm.
And you could buy those up in labor relation office.
At our little safety store.
Yeah.
Did visitors come on occasion to see you?
About once a year, we'd have open house.
Mm-hmm.
And we always had a good attendance for the open houses.
Did they bring in the not parents, but the moms and the
Moms, anybody,
kids?
it was, anybody from the family. They were all interested in, terribly interested in what we did there. Of course, we didn't let them go through some of the dangerous areas.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember when we changed from drop forging cranks to pressing cranks? We went from to the so-called 6,000 ton presses.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. They put two big presses in up there, and started pressing them out instead of forging them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Was that did that go faster? Was that a quicker thing?
Tell you the truth, I don't know. I was out there in the back office at the
You
time
had gone
when
on
that
the office when
changeover.
that was there. Okay.
When that changeover came,
Mm-hmm.
I used to see the finished product come through there because we shipped it out.
Yes.
And along about in 1970, I think it was, they got to using me for acting foreman when somebody would go on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And
now, was it still in the materials world? The material handling?
yeah. And I would take care of my clerking duties and the acting foreman at the same time.
So double duty.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And then one day I was on acting foreman and had been for maybe a month. And one of the, I forget his name, he come by and met me in the hallway and he says, "Hey, Packard," he says, As of 2 weeks ago, you're on permanent foreman. I said, gee, thanks. He said, didn't come from me, came from over there.
That's a good way to learn about it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I forget what year that was, whether it was in 68 or 69 or 70, some ways along in there.
Uh-huh. When did you retire, Joy?
74,
74?
on an early out.
Not early. That
I
was,
only had, in 1957, I was laid off for 8 months when I was on finger truck driving.
mhm,
And then in 1958, I was laid off 4 months.
okay.
So when I retired, why, instead of me having 25 years in, all I had was 23 and a half.
Oh,
Because you
you
didn't get
lost that
credit.
time,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh-huh, uh-huh.
But they offered me an early out. I called my wife up and asked her. And she says, I told her, and I had to figure out what I'd get. And she says, take it, take it, take it. I was 59 at the time.
Sure.
And we'd been wondering what I could do to retire at the age 62.
Yeah,
Because they wanted you to stay till 65.
sure.
But I had heard that if you wrote the right letter and the right person read it, that you might get out when you were 62.
Mm-hmm.
So when this early out thing came up, why, I thought it was a good idea to grab it.
Sure. That was during that oil crunch.
Yep.
Yeah, that first oil crunch that we
The gasoline shot up to $1.50 a gallon.
Right, right. What do you think was maybe the best boss you had while you were working there?
Well, I don't think I had any best bosses, and I don't think I had any bad bosses.
Okay.
There was one general foreman that if I'd had anything to say, I'd have fired him. In the, I don't remember his name, but he was he used to be a carpet laborer before he carpet layer before he hired in there.
Really? My goodness. Sure.
And he and I had conflicting. Of course, this was after I was on supervision.
Yeah.
And we had conflicting ideas about things.
Did they send you off to any kind of school at all to learn how to be a foreman?
No.
It was by the School of Hard Knocks, kind of.
Yeah. It seems to me like we had a forum one time.
Okay.
And John Powers was there.
All right.
It was an information course more than anything about how to get along with the union.
Yeah. Yeah. Any what I would call interesting occurrences happen during your time there that would be worthy of note?
Not that I can recall. I always liked working there. Seems like we never had a dull moment.
Mm-hmm.
It was always, every night was a different from the night before, or every day. It was a demanding job.
Did you see your plant manager out in the plant very often?
I used to see Bud Miller, but Corbin occasionally. But Bud used to make regular tours down through there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think
I guess Bud was the general superintendent.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And these other guys like Louis Culp, I think all worked for him, as I remember.
Yeah.
So he seems like it was a guy by the name of Wiley Beeman. Does that ring a bell?
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a plant engineer perhaps.
Very possible. I remember the name, but I don't remember his position.
Right. Well, what have we forgot to talk about? Anything else?
Probably 100 things. I'll remember them after you're
After I
gone.
get going, yeah, that's what usually happens.
But, you know, I haven't been around anybody from the plant since I retired. And so we don't, haven't had much reason for recalling
Mhm.
anything until you came around.
But that's okay. It's interesting to learn about how and where we did things.
Oh, on the north side of 202, we built a steel plant out there.
Oh, okay. Was that there when you left?
Yeah,
All right.
$1 million steel plant.
Mhm.
I don't know whether they made some steel that was good because we forged it, sent it out to somebody,
Okay.
but they did an awful lot of experimenting.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Forgot about that thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Bud Miller was in there. Yeah, Bud, that was his baby.
And a guy by the name of Howard Rohrback. I
Yeah,
remember Howard.
Howdy
Yeah.
Rohrbeck. Yeah, he had the, what on earth was way down there at the end of 202. There was a shop in there of some kind. What'd they do?
See, did he run clean and finish?
No.
He didn't run clean and finish.
Well, he might have at one time, but Howdy had he had that outfit way down there at the end of 202. What on earth was he doing down there? Well, he went, also, he, was into this, uh, what do they call it? Um, Steel mill.
Yeah.
He was running that
He ran
too.
the steel mill. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Is that still there? They tear it out.
Oh, no, it's there, but they took out all that machinery. It is no longer being used.
For anything.
Well, they're using it for, I think they're using it, that plant now makes cars.
Yeah.
It makes the Buick Riata automobile complete.
Yeah.
And I think they use the steel mill for their stamping plant,
Oh.
part of their stamping plant,
Hmm.
where they're making sheet metal parts for that car.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
One time, I was on supervision at the time. They sent, from this steel mill, they ordered a huge, must have been a 25-ton truckload of chalk.
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 Like you.
That's what the nurse down the first aid told me it was.
Oh my goodness.
But I got a hold of Miller, and he told me where to dump it out there. And we was having trouble getting it off the truck. And the guy was sitting in the truck, and he would keep banging his bed
Yeah.
to get the chalk to come out. And I would stand back there at the back and run the lever up and down.
Yeah.
We finally got it all off. But when we got all off, I couldn't hardly see.
I can imagine you.
I had safety glasses on, but I should have had goggles.
You probably look like you've been in a flower
And
mill.
yeah, I went down to first aid, and the nurse washed and washed with water
Yeah.
to get this chalk out of my eyes.
Right.
She looked it up. I told her what it was. We was unloading it. She looked it up. She said, "Well, that's chalk," in her medical book.
Mm-hmm.
And she washed and washed, and I guess she finally got it all out.
Yeah, they probably had some chemical name for it, calcium carbonate or some darn thing.
It's like that.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But you know, they never did use it.
Really?
Really?
Oh my God.
Somebody had ordered it in there that somebody told them they needed to make steel with.
Uh-huh.
And it turned out they didn't need it.
What did we do with it?
They resold it or gave it to somebody.
Gracious sakes. Isn't that interesting? See, I think the guy, Ralph McNitt, was another guy I remember that dealt with the steel plant. He was the process engineer on the
Yeah.
site.
Tall, skinny guy.
Kinda, yeah, dark hair.
They all say he wore glasses. Everybody wore glasses.
Right, look for the guy that wore glasses.
Yeah, I remember the name,
Yeah.
and I remember him.
Oh,
His name seemed to fit him.
yeah, there was another Fred McClone. Fred McClone.
I don't recall.
Joe Schneider.
Schneider.
He was up in the tool and die design.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I can remember any more names or not. Bob Mooney was over there
Yeah.
for a period of time. In the 50s, someplace in there.
I wonder if Ray Federall's still there. He must have retired.
Oh, Ray's retired, yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think so, anyway. Yeah. Well, okay. That's a pretty good recount of what went on over there at that point in time. I think that's excellent. Was the truck driving task a tough job?
It was, yeah, I would say it was a tough job
Things were
if
pretty
you did your job.
things were pretty tight and narrow in small spaces.
Yeah, and you had people. I used to sit on my three-wheel cart when I was on supervision down by the coffee machine, looking towards the back dock.
Mhm.
And there was an aisleway running east and west and another one going north and south. And I'd sit there and I'd think, now I wonder who's doing the working around here.
Mhm.
There was so much traffic in those aisles.
Mhm.
Any time of the day that you could sit there and look, there was always somebody going or somebody coming.
Mhm.
And I wonder how we used to get the work done.
Mhm. Maybe it was getting done all by itself.
Yeah. This is after,
Yeah.
when we had all the front end
Sure.
assemblies there
Yeah.
and things like that. It was a busy place, but we turned out good products.
Did the axles, when we converted to the axles, did that pose any problems that were unique or different? Do you remember any?
You mean when we upset them?
No, just even in the, well, yeah, in the manufacturing anywhere, not necessarily upsetting, but just,
We were even machining ring gears there.
yeah, yeah, and cutting all the gear teeth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that created a problem. If those gears didn't get made at the right angle with those teeth in there, you'd assemble them in a car and you'd have a whining rear end. And we had a little problem with that.
But they used to say a singing rear end is a happy rear end.
Yeah.
I remember that somewhere from there.
I remember back in 1939 it was. 39, yeah. I had a friend that had a Pontiac and it sang for 2 years for him and they never did fix it.
And it probably never really heard it.
And they didn't know what was causing it.
Yeah.
It took them 10 years to find out that if they didn't have enough clearance in that ring gear, it would sing.
Yeah. It's like so many other things. Takes a while to learn.
Yeah. Cars are so much better today than they used to be 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
And people will say, give me the good old car I used to have. And that's really not true.
Everybody's, I remember Alex Pratt saying, I wished I had my 1955 Olds back.
Yeah.
That was the best car I ever owned.
Yeah, that's right.
Everybody that had one said that was the best.
Yeah.
This is the best that I've ever owned. Yeah. I used to have a 1961. 61. Olds that you like too. It's shaped like a bullet.
Oh, yes.
She was crazy about that.
Yeah.
But when she got that 71 Tornado, she could use that for tow truck or anything.
You bet. Boy, that car went. It sure did.
I just got rid of it when I moved down here.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I had it for 12, 14 years.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, it sure would. Yeah,
It just wouldn't wear out.
yeah. Those were good jalopies.
I never put a set of brakes on it until they had 110,000 miles on it.
Isn't that something? That's great.
The guy said, he said 2, 3 more stops, you'd have been to the rivets.
Uh-huh. Timed right. Timed right. Well, Joy, maybe we should quit. I don't want to overstay my welcome, but also would like to collect whatever we
You
can.
can't overstay your welcome, but
So,
I think I'm pretty well pumped dry.
okay, and that's good. And then we do appreciate it because it's just, once again, it's not too many folks will remember back to the forging days. And so it's interesting to gather that. And 30, 40, 50 years from now, somebody will pull out a tape and turn it on and they're going to say, oh my God, is that how we used to do that? So, okay, well, I'll kick this off.